Hello, welcome back to 2 Cells 1 Pack.
Today we're going to be looking at the veteran Abrams. We'll take it down and do a motor swap, but it'll be the same steps as doing a tire change.
Alright, let's do it.
These are the tools you'll need to complete the Abrams tire change. A 4 and 5mm hex, a 10mm socket, a valve core removal tool, an X-Acto blade, a PH2 screwdriver, 3 tire spoons, some silicone, and lastly an 8mm hex on a breaker bar. After removing the pedals, there are 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holding each battery shell up. Once you remove the battery packs, you may be tempted to start unscrewing. However, my tip would be to loosen these 3 8mm hex bolts first, as they can be quite tight, and this holds it all together in one piece. If you start removing the small screws, you may find yourself being very hard to remove these, and you may crack the plastic at the same time. The next step now is to remove these 4 screws, as well as the 2 here and 2 there, so total 8 screws per side, in order for us to get ready to lift the shell. After removing those 16 bolts, the next step is to remove this cover to show us the phase wires and have us disconnect them. We will need to cut along this silicone line and then use a flathead screwdriver to pry the cover open. You'll notice these 3 sockets. You can either use a 10mm or 3/8 socket to release these. Now just keep in mind that there are these brass washers, so do not lose these washers. After the washers, you take them out. The next step is now to lift the body off the motor. Doing so will allow you to remove these by hand off the motor. Once all the air has been released, the next step is to push this tire off the bead of the rim. You can do so by massaging and putting your weight, and you'll hear it pop. Once it's popped, the rest of it will be fairly easy. Just massage your way across. We are now ready to put the tire back on. It is a tubeless tire, so there's no tube. So what we'll do is we'll stick one side on first, and you take one of your hands and you squeeze it into the gap of the rim, and using the other hand you can kind of massage it over. And as just like that, my first bead is in. Now with the second bead, you want to do the same thing. Squeeze one side down and into the rim and work your way around. Being tubeless, we need to make sure that we force the tire onto the bead to create that seal, and that will allow us to fill up air. However, to do that, we need a high volume of air to go through this. So if you have a gas station nearby or a compressor, you'll need to use one of those. The battery-powered electric pumps will not push enough volume of air for you to seat this bead. In order to start the seating process, I will first remove the tire valve so that we can get the most volume of air that's possible. So that pop is what you want to hear. That pop signifies that the bead is set into the rim. We are now ready to make the motor back with the rest of the wheel. Now, make sure your motor cable is facing north, and you want to place the motor pedal hangers back on in this method. We cannot put the screws back on yet until we put the rest of the body back on. After mating the wheel with the rest of the body, I like to put the motor bolts back in loosely, just to make sure that the alignment with the threads on the axle are complete. Now, if all goes well, these bolts will line up perfectly with the axle. If not, you may need to kind of readjust it as best as you can to see if you can line up the holes. Now you'll want to get these to be tight, but not too tight. We're going to go around and do all the other bolts, and then we'll come back at the end to tighten them down one last time. The reason why we don't want to tighten these down fully just yet is because the rest of the bolts will help the frame have more structure, and therefore when we're tightening these down and holding down the roll cage, we run a lower risk of cracking the plastic. Now, in order to put these screws back on the frame, you may need to line up the holes first properly before inserting your screw. Now that you've pre-threaded all 8 bolts, it is now time to go around and tighten them all together. With all the bolts aligning the frame, make sure you don't forget to go back and tighten up your motor axle bolt. When reattaching these phase wires, it may be a little bit tight, but make sure you push all the cables into its proper recesses when putting everything back in. Before putting the nuts back on, make sure you put your 3 brass washers. After tightening everything down, make sure that none of your Hall sensor wires can be pinched when putting the cover back on. Now, before replacing these covers, you'll want to put a small dab of silicone to ensure that it is properly water sealed. The last step now is to put the battery packs back on and the pedals. Now, if you forget which battery pack is the right or the left side, you can look for the front or the back of the pack based on the hole here. If there's an extra hole, this signifies the back of the wheel, and therefore this pack is for the right side of the wheel. Before screwing the packs together onto the wheel, you want to make sure you put both packs on. Now what this does is it helps you align the shell, because at the bottom here it will sit on the battery packs, and this will make it an easier time for you to align the screws that screw the battery pack onto the wheel's frame. And that's a wrap for the Abrams tire change.
So we will see you in our next video. Bye bye.